Today I am here with James and Anna, and we are talking about Chasing the Present, a new film that has recently come out that was inspired by, James, your curiosity for what? If you had to choose one word, what would you say?
One word. Okay. It, it's difficult with one word. I can do a couple words. That's my best.
Okay.
My curiosity to understand how to end my suffering.
Yeah. Yeah. That was really clear throughout the whole film. There was a quest of understanding, at least my takeaway was sort of the purpose of suffering and then how to work through it in a way that is quick and also meaningful.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. I wouldn't say it was necessarily quick. We spent, actually in February, it'll be 5 years that we've been working on this project. And, and I think the filming part and the traveling and all that was probably about 3 years, 2.5, 3 years realistically. And we didn't really go into it with the intention of like, okay, I've been suffering with anxiety my whole life. Let's try to heal that. Let's get rid of anxiety. It was more just trying to understand the root causes of where it comes from and to try to understand those spaces. And through doing that and through all the traveling and the talking to all these incredible people, and we really start to understand ourselves better and to really be able to dive into what was really happening.
Anna, can you say a little bit about your role in the film too?
Yeah, so I'm a producer on the film, and I have my own personal story where I was also suffering and really stressed and really anxious and really depressed and had hit an emotional rock bottom. And I also went to ask like how to find happiness or how to feel better. And so I did a lot of these practices that were in the film. I had done that separately on my own, like my yoga teacher training and learning meditation and exploring like what is the root cause of what's causing me pain. And through that, our paths merged when I was working for a friend of James, and like he put me in touch with them, and I joined the project, and I've been with them for a few years, and it's been really great.
That's so wonderful. So for people who haven't yet watched it, James, can you walk us through kind of what they might expect? Who are they going to see? What is the sort of the theme throughout as you're talking to the different experts in the film?
Well, it really started with like this idea of, I've been suffering with really debilitating anxiety since I was about 15 years old. And when I started making the film, I guess I was about 31 or 32 years old. So, 16, 17 years of my life, I was having panic attacks on a bi-weekly or monthly basis, and just trying to understand how to deal with that. What are the root causes of that? So it started simply by like, okay, we've heard so much about yoga and we've dabbled and we've done some yoga classes from time to time, but we never fully immersed ourselves in it. So we thought, well, let's go to India and do a yoga teacher training. So we went to India and we lived there for a while, and we did a hatha yoga teacher training. And then when we were there, it led us into many other things. Then we went to Nepal and studied meditation with nuns and monks in the Himalayas. And then we were hearing so much about ayahuasca, so we went to Peru and to the Amazon with the Shipibo people, and we lived there for 5 weeks and did several ayahuasca ceremonies. And then, we were all over Europe and Iceland and Asia and South America, and we drove across the entire United States talking to just incredible people who we found very inspiring, like, Russell Brand, for example, and Sharon Salzberg and Zelda Hall and Graham Hancock and Alex Gray and Gary Weber and Joseph Goldstein, just several people that we found to be really inspiring. Like, we thought, well, these guys seem like they have it figured out. So let's talk to them and see what we can learn from these incredible people. So that's kind of what to expect, really, is just an honest inquiry into how do I end this suffering that I'm dealing with, that I've been dealing with my whole life? What is the root cause of this? Can I understand it without simply just going to the doctor and, eating more Xanax and exactly.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciated, as I was watching the film, the integration that you brought to how do I want to say this, sort of the concurrent importance between not only understanding what was going on in a cognitive way, but addressing it in your body. And I appreciated the theme of yoga throughout, and this idea of kind of quiet and stillness and presence really being the path through the suffering. And I know it's really hard for people sometimes to understand or to make peace with the fact that sometimes the only way to heal is to move through the pain, because as a culture, we're so used to having a quick fix. You know, I'll take a pill, or I'll do this thing over here, and we distract ourselves a lot. And so I loved the idea of sort of going in and being able to stay with whatever was happening internally in a really integrated way. Being, again, what I sort of took from the whole synthesis of what everybody in the film was saying.
Yeah. Yeah, it is really like that. You know, it's just going in and really looking at your thoughts, which are the root cause of your suffering. And I think that's really hard to understand when we're used to just putting a Band-Aid on everything, especially, and distracting ourselves and just taking like little hits of dopamine through a wide variety of things. And it's hard to really like get to the root problem and see your thoughts, and then you have to try to change them.
Yeah, that's the fun part and the hard part. Yeah. What were some of the more difficult things that you ran into on this journey in terms of understanding or making peace with, you know, what you were learning in yourself? I think we've lost James.
I was like, where'd he go? Yeah. I mean, there's just so many. It's first like there's so many lessons, like recognizing that, you know, feelings are not facts is a great lesson. Learning to pause. So when you do have a feeling, like we can't always control what we feel, but we can control how we react to it, and how we respond to it, and how we behave. But all of that for me felt very counterintuitive, because I thought my feelings were the truth. I thought my thoughts were the truth. Also, I didn't recognize that there was another voice in my head telling me negative thoughts, like being really quite vicious to myself, you know, like speaking to myself in a way I would never speak to another person, and which was actually making me feel really bad. Or it's hard when you, especially if you're really worried about something, or you're really stressed and you're really anxious, like that's how you feel. It's really difficult to comprehend that it's not the truth. And it takes so much practice and dedication to just give like a tiny pause so that you can deal with it.
Right. And in taking that pause, I think that's really the key, because the part of our brain that is so quick to react is really geared toward helping us survive. And so it thinks everything is a crisis, right? And we have to act right now. But in reality, we have very few crises that we actually face. And so being able to just elongate that time and space between the immediate impulse, whether it's an emotional impulse or a behavioral impulse, and our ability to sort of make sense of what's going on in the here and now, is the difference between saying something that you can't take back, right? Or making a decision to act in a certain way that might have really dire consequences in the future. And so this staying in the present and being mindful and being able to hold space for yourself to catch up, if you will, in that brain process is so important, not only for healing, but just in everyday governance and functioning.
Yeah, absolutely. And just in like staying present, you know, if we remind ourselves that in the present, everything is fine. And we really only have this present moment, which again, you know, the whole film is chasing the present. Like I'm still chasing the present. I wish I could say that I'm just walking around fully present all the time. But that's just not the reality. But I am getting much better at training my mind to be more present and just to remind yourself over and over again, because right now, right this second, everything is fine.
Yeah. And that's really, I think, one of the coolest things that I took away from the film. I can't remember who said it exactly, but there was someone who said something along the lines of, okay, now you're in the present, and now, and now, and now. And so if we really kind of break down our life in this granular way and look at it as every single moment is a snapshot, it's an opportunity. And if we try to just bring ourselves back to that moment when we are distressed, then we have a much greater likelihood of being able to, stay in that knowing that everything is okay, except for the moments when it's not, right? And sometimes it really isn't because there's an ecological danger, but otherwise it's usually our mind overestimating the amount of risk that we face.
Yeah.
Welcome back, James.
Thanks. Sorry, I'm in Costa Rica, like I said, and the Wi-Fi wasn't so great, but I just moved to a different thing and I have full signal here. So let's see. Should be good.
Nice. James, one of the things that I was so curious as I was watching the film was how, let me think about how I want to ask this. Your dad. I loved that you brought your dad into the film, and I'm so curious about what that was like for you, because at times it seemed like he was super supportive, and then at other times it seemed like he didn't quite buy what you were selling. And I'm wondering about that and like what that was like.
Well, the idea to have my dad in the film in that role was it was really, it was kind of inspired by this Ram Dass quote of, if you think you're enlightened, go home and spend a week with your family and then see how enlightened you are, which I think is super cool, because it's like this idea of anybody can go to India or go to Nepal or go to Costa Rica or wherever and just live like, oh, life is amazing. I'm here. I'm just focused on myself and connecting with myself and connecting with nature and all that kind of stuff. And then they go back home, and then, we confront our parents or our friends who are kind of living in the way maybe that we used to live, or in the way that we're still living, but we somehow took a break from that or whatever. Yeah. So to sit down with probably the most judgmental person in my life, who's my father, who, it was just super interesting to sit with him and to just tell him. The whole idea for the conversation was, okay, you've been making this film now for 2 or 3 years, and he didn't really know what it was about. Like, he had no idea. At some point, actually, like, he thought I had cancer, and I was telling him about that because I lost so much weight, because I did so many cleanses and ayahuasca and all these different things. I lost like 25 pounds. And he's like, wow. Oh, is this film about you having cancer? I'm like, no, I don't have cancer. But what it is about is anxiety. And in that scene, it was the first time in my life, actually, that I ever told my father that I had anxiety. I didn't grow up in a household where it was cool to share our emotions, or where it was cool for men or boys to cry, or it was acceptable to express any type of feminine energy, coming from a man. It just wasn't allowed, because my father didn't know how to do that. He never learned how to do that in his life, because he had a very, very hard and difficult childhood. So he had to build up these layers of protection around himself, so that he couldn't feel, because the things that he needs to feel are so painful. And I was on that same trajectory until certain things happened in my life, and I didn't have a choice, but I had to feel. And I'd realized by feeling those things, I actually was feeling better, and that it was okay to feel these things, and it was safe to feel these things. And the relationship with my father since I've been doing that has grown a lot. He is a good guy down inside, and he has a good heart, but there's some things that we need to work through together. And I think me making this film and having that open conversation with him was really helpful. And I think the other key point to that is this idea of boundaries, so to speak. Like, I've learned also, being open doesn't mean that you can't be open and be sensitive and feel, but at the same time you can have boundaries and protect that space, because it's a really sacred, special space, this space to be able to be sensitive and be open. So it's like, how do we learn how to do that, and at the same time have these little boundaries for ourselves, for people when they're hating on us, or saying things that aren't appropriate or crossing the lines, and that kind of thing. So it's like that dance of just trying to see how to do that. And I think learning how to do that dance with my father is in a sense, I guess he's the ultimate dance partner for that.
I love how you say that.
Thank you.
And it's so, I think, I really appreciated that part of the film, because just like the quote that you mentioned, it's really challenging sometimes to marry the different parts of our lives together when we start going on a trajectory that is one of healing and one of evolving past a point where we felt stuck. And certainly the goal isn't to vilify people who aren't on the same path, but it can be very challenging sometimes to hold space for the different paces with which people are aware and willing and interested to grow and be cognizant of their own process. Not everyone's interested in that, and that's okay. But it can be really challenging when those relationships start to change. And I really appreciated you kind of highlighting that in the film and like bringing it back to reality, because we don't often want to forget our roots, but creating a new relationship to them takes work.
Definitely.
Yeah.
It's actually a lot of people's most favorite part of the film. Like afterwards, everybody comes up to me and they're like, "Oh my God, I loved your dad. I wish he was in there more." And I wish, it was just cool. A lot of people really like that. And it spoke to a lot of people, because I think most people have some kind of an issue with one of their parents, at least. I have bet very few people have had like totally perfect relationships with their parents. It just doesn't happen, right? We're here to learn, and they can be our best teachers. But it's interesting because that part resonates a lot with everyone.
Yeah, I know. It really did resonate, and I think highlighted the challenge that is sometimes, recognizing your parents as the perfectly, wonderfully imperfect, fallible humans that they are, and kind of holding space for their own process as well as yours at the same time can be challenging. And it looks, of course we don't know what the reality is behind the scenes, but it really looked in the film like that was a graceful endeavor on your part.
Thank you.
Yeah. Anna, I'm so curious about kind of what was the most meaningful element of making this film for you? What did you walk away with really having shifted on or seeing differently?
Well, there's so many, but the most meaningful part was that, all the filmmakers that made this film, we all lived the teachings in the movie. Mm-hmm. So we all practice these things daily. We've all researched them. We've, taken courses. We've done all the work. We're continuously doing the work. So I've been doing that, and it just has transformed and like basically saved my life. Like I went from being really unhappy to feeling like life was meaningless and not even worth living. Oh. I know, it's so drastic, but it was true. Like that is how unhappy I was for many, many, many reasons. And now I'm really happy and I'm really grateful. And I'm not happy all the time. I just am able to deal with my emotions and to know that they will pass and that they're not as strong as they used to be. And I'm just really like, the best part of making this was we made this film to help other people, to just bring like, we learned so much. It helped us so much. All we wanted to do was share this with as many people as possible. And since we're filmmakers, this is the medium that works for us to bring it out. So like to be able to, change the way anybody thinks or to help them on their journey is really a gift.
Yeah, it really is. It's remarkable when you are helping someone or when you're working with them and you see that subtle shift of integration in them. And it was really cool watching the film to see, James, as you were learning from the different people and speaking with the different people, it was fun to sort of see the evolution of understanding in you and the way that it just became so much more clear that you were integrating what you were learning. And I could see a different calm and a different peace as you were talking about different aspects of your journey throughout. And it's really beautiful, as a psychologist, to be witness to that in people as they're doing the work in therapy. And I just thought it was really cool the way you highlighted how possible it is for people to do that, not only in therapy, but through some of these other kinds of spiritual or bodywork focused endeavors.
Yeah, and I think they're closely overlapped as well, like therapy and psychological practices and these spiritual traditions. They're very similar. I mean, I was inspired to start studying again, actually, while making the film. And I recently, like 2 years ago, I graduated from the University of Colorado with a degree in psychology. And now I'm working on a master's in therapy and psychology at Wake Forest University currently, because I thought it was super interesting. I think it's actually important, like the hybrid approach of both different ways, for certain people, because certain people need to be able to understand things psychologically in the mind, So to be able to do that while being able to understand how to be present and being able to learn how to feel and to be able to understand what you're feeling and to be able to understand psychologically what being present actually means, what's actually happening, is really cool. I've been in therapy for over 10 years. Which may be a long time. Now that I think about it, I guess it's not recommended, right, to have someone in therapy for 10 years, but not like weekly for 10 years. Just I have someone who's amazing, Zelda, she's in the film. And when I feel something, sometimes I just feel super amazing and I want to have a session with her just to talk about how amazing I feel. And other times maybe a relationship is ending, or I have some struggles with work stuff or whatever. It's just so great to be able to talk, and so important, And Josh Korda is a Buddhist chaplain, and he's also a psychologist and a counselor. He's the guy with all the tattoos who's in one of the opening scenes of the film. And, he says so often, and also I've learned it and you've learned it, and it is that way. It's so important to feel seen by someone.
Yeah.
It's so important to feel, held by someone. And so often our parents don't know how to do that. Sometimes they do, if you're fortunate enough to have that kind of an upbringing, that's fantastic. But for a lot of people, we don't have that. So having a therapist or having a really close friend that can be unbiased and actually just sit there and be present with you while you feel what you need to feel, and just kind of provide that space where you can feel safe and feel heard and feel loved. It's so important. I mean,
it really is.
I don't know if any of the talking or any of the exercises or I don't know if any of that stuff is actually more important than someone actually just sitting there and being present and just feeling you and allowing you to just be as you are in the moment.
Yep. I mean, the research consistently shows that having one secure relationship in your life is the difference between make and break experience in life. And with a secure relationship, when I think of is somebody who does exactly what you just said. They can hold space for you, they don't judge you, and they attune to you and really witness your experience. And that really is the whole crux of therapy. I mean, sure, there's a lot of skill building and specific problem solving that a therapist can help people navigate, but at the core of it, it's a relationship. And it really is a relationship based on being seen and being validated. And that is something that I think is really quick to go the wayside when people have unresolved trauma or haven't had that modeled for them in their personal lives. And parents do their best. I don't think anyone embarks on the course of parenthood with an idea of, I'm going to really mess up my kid. That's not a goal usually.
Sure. For sure.
But when we have unresolved stuff, it really can get in the way of parents being able to show up the way their kids need them to, and the things that get in the way are complicated identities, not knowing who we are or needing to see ourselves a certain way. And so that can kind of interrupt a parent's ability to show up and validate their children in a way that is useful for the kids in their development. And so when we get stuck in these habits of this is how it's always been done or how I was raised, and we fail to recognize the needs of the young ones around us and adapt in accordance to that, then we just keep perpetuating this experience of invalidation, even though we might be doing our best as parents. And I really feel like that's sort of the core of peace, is being able to have someone attuned to you, because when we have that experience, we can regulate ourselves a lot more effectively, right? We're no longer operating from a place of needing to secure safety. It's already there. And then we can go about the business of developing and growing and flourishing and being, becoming the people that we are. So if that doesn't happen in childhood, learning how to do that later as adults is really important for our own, sort of sense of who we are in the world.
For sure. Absolutely.
Yeah. And like part of this journey has also been just being grateful for like everything. Like I have no resentment towards my parents anymore. Like if anything, like changing the story that whatever the parents, the world, whatever was inflicted upon you, I'm now just super grateful because it made me who I am, instead of looking at it as like something bad that happened.
Yeah, that's a beautiful reframe. What a gift. Yeah,
Definitely.
So what would you say to people who don't, let me think about how I want to say this. What would you say to people who have skepticism about the importance of presence, or the importance of mindfulness, and really kind of being in that centered space, or anything along your healing journey? What would you say to them?
I mean, I'm not one that likes to profess to know answers or to give tips to others, but from my own life experience, I could say that I was a skeptic, and that I was like, oh, I don't know about this yoga stuff. I remember the first time I ever did a yoga class was probably like, I don't know, 15 years ago or something. And I went in and I was like, I don't know, this is strange. It was only women. And I was like, should I be here? I'm like the only guy. Maybe that's a good thing. Maybe it's not. I don't know. Let's see what's happening. But yeah, and I was definitely a skeptic. So I would say, really, just try it. I mean, it's like, how tired are you of suffering in your life? How tired of you of feeling anxious? How badly do you not want to be depressed anymore? How much are you, like, how tired of you of the way that life is going? And that's what it was for me. I just didn't want to deal with it anymore. I've tried a lot of things, self-medicating, doing this, doing that, so many different things to try to feel differently than the way that I was feeling. So doing a little meditation practice for 10 minutes every day, or trying to spend more time in nature to feel presence, or to do these different things, for me, it was like, yeah, sure, I can try that. I've tried everything else. And that's really my kind of suggestion, is just, why not? What do you have to lose? Nothing. What do you have to gain? Maybe you have to gain the opportunity of really changing your life and having a shot at being happy.
I love that. Anna, how about you? What would you say to someone who is doubting that there's hope for themselves?
Well, I had the gift of desperation. That's how I see it. Like, I had to be so miserable and so unhappy and at such rock bottom that I had no choice. I had to do something. And when you're at that place where you have to do something, like, you'll try anything. And you'll keep trying things until it works. But I was in that space also. I started this journey when I was 32. And up until then, I thought everything was ridiculous, and like, I didn't need therapy. And, I don't think our current world is like that, how it was when we were growing up, where it's like, you just deal with yourself. I think we went through a revolution where we all knew that we have to take care of our bodies by working out and going to the gym and eating healthily. And now we're at this era where we all know we need to take care of our minds. And we need to look at mental health, and we need to look at that the same way we look at going to the gym. You go to the gym, or whatever workout you do, whatever you do to take care of your physical health, you don't just do it once. It's a continued practice, and it's something you do all the time. And that's the same with your mental health. If you want something to change, you need to try other things. Yeah. As James said, you have nothing to lose. Like, you go to therapy and you hate it, okay. You go to yoga and you don't like it, all right. Or like, looking for something that'll make you feel better. And I know, like, when I started doing yoga, I just thought I wanted to keep doing yoga until I felt the way about yoga, the way I heard all these, what I thought crazy people talk about. They were so obsessed and it saved their lives and it transformed everything. And I was like, that's ridiculous, you know? And I didn't get it for the first few months. I just was like, I'm going to go until I understand what they're saying. Whether I choose to stay or not, I don't know. But I kept going. And it honestly, I just know that when I left yoga class, it made me feel slightly better. So I just kept doing it.
Yeah. I mean, that's a lot of, that's a leap of faith to say, I'm going to stay here until I feel like I see other people feel about this practice, until I get it. I really appreciate that willingness to kind of sit with the unknown and the discomfort of it all. I mean, I know when I took my yoga teacher training, almost 15 years ago, I took it, and as I was there, I remember feeling so bristled to a lot of what I was hearing. And I'm like, why am I so defensive? I chose this. I wanted to be here. I want to learn. But even in those moments, I really felt like, you know, and it made me appreciate the way in which our body and our mind act together outside of our consciousness to keep us safe. And that dismissiveness, that sort of bristling, that denial is rooted in the old ways that we know how to keep ourselves safe and keep ourselves protected from things that are uncomfortable. And often when we start the healing process, and it is an integrated mind-body experience, it's not always comfortable or fun. You know, it requires being willing to get a little bit more uncomfortable. And once you can sit with that, then I think that gift of like, you know, the ability to sort of exhale and let go of some of the suffering is really a lot more available.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, you know, you can also, I'm super judgmental. I can't speak for other people, but like the constant judgment, not only towards other people in the practices, but the constant judgments towards myself, which is much less. It was much more towards myself. And absolutely, like looking at things and thinking they're ridiculous, or just going into it with a sense of humor. Like I still go and can laugh at the absurdity of the things that we do, but it makes me feel better. And so that's really all I care about. And if it makes me feel better, then it makes sense to me.
Well, I want to know about some of the ridiculous things that you do that make you feel better.
I don't know.
You're turning the same color as your shirt. I love it.
She's turning red? She's turning red right now. Okay. Awesome.
Goodness, you put me on the spot. You know too much. No. But either way, there are, like, if you think about, you know, just even, we're gonna go meditate for 11 hours a day, like doing Vipassana, a 10-day retreat, or meditating from 6 a.m. to 9:30. That just seems like crazy. That would have seemed crazy to me before I started on the journey. Like, I thought I heard people say they did that, and I was like, why would you go be in silence for 10 days? That's insane.
Yeah.
And it was amazing.
What did you learn being silent for 10 days? I'm curious.
Well, really fun to get to sit with yourself. You for sure see that your thoughts are on a loop. Like over and over, it's like the same story, it's the same thoughts. And I love being in silence. It's my favorite thing to do. And I remember the first time I did it, I just did 1 day of silence in an ashram. Like, I'd heard about you could just not speak for a day, and I thought that seemed crazy. Like, that seems really strange. But I wanted to do that, and just not being interrupted. There's something in not being interrupted. For me, when I go into silence, my thoughts slow down, and that's when I really notice the effect of, I mean, other people, the world. It doesn't mean we're supposed to go off and live in silence all the time. I mean, some people choose that, but it just just that I need time alone. And I spent my whole life just never being alone because I didn't like myself and I didn't like my thoughts. And I didn't know that I was constantly running from that by always doing something or being around people. And so, yeah, like learning when I stopped, learning to hear that voice that was really in the beginning, really not nice, telling me what a piece of shit I was all the time, that I wasn't good enough, you know, swearing for anything. Oh, I missed the subway. And then it's like, oh, you're so stupid. Why'd you do that? You always do that. You can't do anything right. Like, it's really not a big deal. You know, the next one will come and you're 2 minutes late, and just seeing how you talk to yourself.
It's amazing, isn't it, when we stop and actually pay attention and what we can hear in that language that we use with ourselves. Yeah. Wow. I wonder if either of you can talk a little bit about the experience with ayahuasca. You know, it can be a very curious process for people who don't know a lot about it.
Well, first of all, from my opinion, that was the first time I've done it, and I did it 5 times. And I don't want to say to anybody that they should go take ayahuasca. I'm not like a person that would tell people to do that. For me, I think it's a real medicine, and it should be used as a medicine. And if you're really struggling with something in your life and you've been working on it and trying to understand it and trying to figure it out, and you really want to kind of get to a deeper level of understanding, then maybe it's right for you if it feels right for you. So just want to say that I really view it and respect it greatly as a medicine. And my experience was really, really, really hard. I did not have like this rainbow butterfly, like unicorn type of experience. It was like, it was difficult. I had like 3.5 of the most difficult, challenging nights of my life before I finally got this understanding. And I think the understanding that I got was just that I was trying to be in control still. You know, like I was in control. You know, here I was, like at this point, literally like locked in a bathroom at an ayahuasca center in Peru, like huddled up on the ground in a corner, like really having a full trippy, you know, journey experience, really scared, really in like a dark, horrible place. And I had this thought of like, what am I doing? Like, I'm fighting something. I'm trying to control something. I'm here in the jungle trying to control ayahuasca. This is impossible. This is what the problem is. And then I had that understanding, and then I went in the room and I laid down back on the ground, and I completely figured out how to surrender. I completely figured out how to let go. And I feel like in that moment, a part of me died. And I even thought to myself in that moment, like, this is death. Like I died, and it's completely okay. It's actually more than okay. It's so beautiful to be able to experience this, to fully surrender to what's happening in the moment. So for me, that was a life-changing lesson of just being able to let go. I become more easygoing, more just accepting things as they come up, you know. Of course, things come up and it's challenging, but at the same time, like, sometimes you can't do anything about it. You know, like I had a crazy thing happen to me yesterday, and I thought about ayahuasca actually. Yesterday, I'm staying in a house in Costa Rica, and I have a rental car, and I let the person who's managing the house take the rental car for me to go to the market. And he took it and he flipped it over, crashed it. Like, luckily he was okay, and he wasn't hurt, but the car's totaled, and he wasn't like a registered driver. So now I have to deal with, you know, like, oh man, I can't believe this happened, you know. And at first I was like, okay, I felt the irritation start to come up, and a little bit of madness and some sadness, and it was okay. It sat there, but I was really surprised at how quickly I was able to just be like, what can I do? Like, it's happened. It's out of my control. Like, how do we just move forward? How do we deal with it? How do we just do it, you know? Whereas before I would maybe be like pissed off about this for weeks, and it would just eat me up, and I would be so mad. You know, it reminds me of the story of, you know, my experience of ayahuasca, I think, is summarized in this story that I heard. And it's a short story, but it's these 2 monks are walking down the river, and they see a nun trying to cross. And one monk picks the nun up and carries her across the river because he didn't want her to get wet. He puts her down, and he's walking, you know, and she's gone. She went on her way, and the two monks are still just chilling, walking next to each other. And about an hour and a half later, the one monk says to the other one, I really can't believe that you picked up that woman, that you touched her, that you carried her. And then the monk says back to him, I can't believe that you're still carrying her. And I think that's, for me, was a really super powerful story of just like the ability to be able to just let go of things when they happen, and to just let go of feelings when they come up after you feel them. And that, I think, for me was the biggest lesson that I've learned in ayahuasca. And it took me a long time to be able to integrate that. Like, I felt really weird and like physically weird for over a year after I took ayahuasca, and very, very, very hypersensitive. And
in
yeah,
what way?
but I just like very sensitive, just like very emotional, feeling a lot of things. Like, I felt like things were coming up more regularly. You know, I was in India with Prem Baba after I did ayahuasca, and I just felt so open in a way that was very beautiful, but it wasn't something that I was used to feeling. So it was also a bit scary. I felt like something was wrong with me because I was so open. And it took me quite a while to kind of integrate that openness in my life.
Yeah. Would you say like that experience of feeling so open, do you liken it to feeling vulnerable? Or is it a little different for you?
No, I think I think vulnerability, I think openness is more than vulnerability, but I think that for me, at least, there's definitely a link. You know, vulnerability is definitely an aspect of that openness.
Yeah. I wonder both of your thoughts on the role of vulnerability in healing.
Well, I mean, one of the first things that I learned in therapy, when like the first lesson I went to, and I was self-medicating a lot with drinking a lot, and she just made this statement like, Anna has a problem with vulnerability. Like, your issue is, anyway, I was with other people, but like your issue is with vulnerability. And I just had I didn't even know what that meant. I had no idea what, and I didn't know what, you know. And then of course I watched Brene Brown's The Power of Vulnerability. And that
she is so brilliant.
I mean, she's brilliant. And that, you know, it's a 16-minute TED Talk that like just floored me and changed everything. I mean, there's so many things that changed everything I believed were true. But I was one of those people, like, I never spoke about my feelings. I never showed anything. I always just acted strong. Like, I had my shit together. I never shared anything ever with anyone. And it's been truly transformative to do that.
Yeah, I feel like that's really sort of the underlying thread here. And James, when I hear you talking about being willing to let go of control, that illusion of safety that we get when we're trying to be in control all the time. I mean, as somebody who is a recovering control freak, I can attest to the need to really be willing to accept our own vulnerability, and not only accept it, but see it as a sign of strength and reframe it from this position of weakness, which I think most of us are trained to see being vulnerable as a sign of weakness. And so we have these over adaptations of like, okay, if I can just control everything, I'll be okay. But being willing to sit down and like be open and be more receptive to what is really scary, because we can risk feeling hurt. But it's also really strong and really transformative when we can kind of take that position of being more open, willing, vulnerable, use whatever language you want to describe it, but not being so with such a fastidious grip on control that we sort of miss the point, you know?
Yeah, and from my experience too, I'm not, you know, obviously I'm not a woman, so I can't speak from, you know, how you guys feel in that sense. But for me, like, I talked to a lot of men, actually quite a lot of men reach out to me since the film, you know, about the same kind of things. And it was very hard for me to be vulnerable, very hard for me to be open. It wasn't something that I was taught. It's not something we're taught in school. Actually, the traditional model of a man is to not be vulnerable. It's to not be open. It's to be the complete opposite of that. So it's like, you know, I don't know to say to someone like, be more vulnerable or be open. For me, that wasn't possible, just to like someone to tell me that, and then I'm just like magically open. Like there's a space, you know, like that we talked about, that maybe you can achieve that space in therapy, or, you know, I met a really amazing woman, and I think I am more open with her than I've ever been with anybody in my life. And it's not because she says to me like, hey, be open, be more open, be more vulnerable, you know, which I've also experienced, and that didn't work. But when you have somebody who's like in that moment and fully present with you, there's actually nothing else other than vulnerability. There's nothing else other than openness in that moment. But how do we tap into that moment where those things exist inside of ourselves? How do we clear the layers away that are covering up that state that we actually all always are? You know, we're meant to be open, vulnerable beings, but there's so much stuff in the way. So, you know, I think the way that I look at it is, instead of me learning how to be open or learning how to be vulnerable, how can I remove the blockages that are preventing me from being something that I already truly really am?
That's beautiful. Well, for people who want to see the film, where can they find it? Chasing the Present.
Currently, it's on iTunes, Vimeo, Google Play. Next year, it'll be on Gaia and some of the other platforms. But right now, if someone wants to watch it, they can go on iTunes and rent it or buy it or whatever, or they can order a DVD if they're still into those kind of things from our website, which is chasingthepresent.com. And yeah, and if anybody wants to talk, Anna and I are both very open, and we love to hear from people and, you know, just share, and we're here for that kind of stuff all the time.
How can they reach out to you both?
Social media, James.Sebastiano on Instagram, James Joseph on Facebook, or through our website. There are email addresses and stuff like that for me. And Anna, how can people get in touch with you?
Through Instagram is best, or Facebook. I'm Anna.Kolber on Instagram, and Anna Kolber on Facebook. And on our website, there's also a link to show all the different places you can rent Chasing the Present.
Wonderful. We'll put all of that in the caption of the video so people can find you easily. Yeah. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you both taking some time to talk about your film, talk about your experiences, and really help people find a way through.